uh, got on the Zoom call to help learn. Our guest today is Michael Talley. He is the Director of Economic Development for the Denton County, and he's so graciously agreed to be our guest today and help you understand what the Phase 2 grant is about, all the questions that you might have, and help teach us how to apply for it. So if you have any questions, please put it in the chat. Michael, welcome to the training session for Phase 2 grant.
Okay, yeah, thanks for having me. Are y'all able to see the screen there?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you, Cindy. Thank you, Lori. Thanks to all the chambers and the economic development corporations that have been great partners through this whole process and getting the word out about our Phase 2. Want to cover some of the changes that are going to be in Phase 2 or that are in Phase 2 since we're already open for application. And then also talk about briefly Phase 1 and then what some of those changes were from Phase 1 to Phase 2, and then go over kind of some of the general requirements and eligibility requirements. So Phase 1, total applications submitted. We'll talk about those in just a minute. Total grants awarded, and then the total funding that went out in Phase 1. There were 1,334 applications. There were actually about 2,000 total applications, but 1,334 applications were submitted. So there were just around 700 or 800 that were not actually finished. So we don't know obviously why those weren't finished, but 1,334 actually submitted. There were 451 grants awarded, and that's all across Denton County. I will say that we started with originally $2.2 million that we were going to do in Phase 1, but we actually granted out just over $3 million, and that's because we put more money in that was from the CARES Act funding that came from the federal government. As far as Flower Mound is concerned, there were 81 applications approved, so just under $600,000. It was actually $575,000 that went to Flower Mound businesses. And then there were 111 denied, and most of those were denied for incomplete documentation. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute, but really want to reiterate, make sure your documentation is correct. There were a number of different reasons. So it could be some people sent in their MasterCard statements instead of their bank statements, their W-9s, their EIN numbers, didn't match on what their application was and what their paperwork showed, or sometimes the auditors couldn't even get into their bank statements because they were password protected. So we'll touch on this here in a little bit later, but want you to remember, if you have someone doing your books for you, whether it be a CPA or someone in-house at your business, please remember that to ask if it's password protected or not, and try to get those CPAs to remove that or include that in your documentation to the auditors so they can access those documents. Because without that, they can't make comparisons. So what were the differences of Phase 2? We'll go through kind of the general information here. So grants awarded will be up to $50,000. Obviously, the big difference in this phase is that it was only up to $10,000 in the first phase. And those are individual grants, and they'll be awarded based on calculating the negative financial impact due to COVID. So what losses did you have during this whole shutdown? And remember, the first phase was non-essential or partially open. This phase is actually open to all businesses unless you're on that ineligible list. So if you were deemed essential, you're still eligible. So if you were deemed essential but had losses throughout this period of time, you will be eligible to recover some of those costs. And that goes for what you're using on Ppe moving forward or during that time to prepare to reopen. So whether it be masks or gloves or table covering, things of that nature. Eligibility. Your businesses have to start before May 1st of 2020. This is a very big change from the first phase. First phase was March 1st of 2019. Main reason they wanted to do that was to look at comparisons in revenue between March, April of 19 to March, April of 2020. What we really wanted to do is help those businesses that were not even able to open. There were a lot of businesses, I use this a lot as an example, but Grandscape in the Colony had a lot of businesses in March and April and May that were about to open. So we wanted to be able to help those businesses as well. So your business had to start or had to have planned on starting before May 1st of 2020. 100 employees or fewer, so that's a big change as well, from 50 employees in the first phase to 100 in the second phase. And just so everyone knows, that covers about a little over 98% of our businesses in Denton County are 100 employees or fewer. Our gross annual revenue requirements, you had to be under 7 million in the first phase. You can now go up to 15 million in gross annual revenue. So that's more than double what it was in the first phase. If you're an owner with more than one business, the owner is eligible for application for up to 3 businesses. And then the application must include a disclosure of anyone that has 20% or more of the business. Another thing on the applications, the required documentation will be reviewed by assigned auditors based on the Commissioners Court approved guidelines. So Commissioners Court members do not see these applicants. I don't even see these applicants. No one in the judge's office or the commissioner's office sees these applicants. So this goes directly to the auditor's office. I had a great question that came in yesterday about what would be released on public records or public information requests. We're getting some clarity on that, but your Social Security, your EINs, your bank statements, that will not be included in any public releases. We will be releasing the business names that are receiving grants and their award amounts. And obviously they'll be able to look at your addresses and things of that nature, but we will not be releasing confidential information. So eligibility continued, checks will be issued. I know this is a question that we get, will it be direct deposit or checks? We will be doing checks again, so we did in phase 1. The applicant must have no outstanding tax liens or judgments. I was just telling Lori and Cindy before we jumped on this call, we had a individual that owns a business yesterday that had no idea they owed 4 years of business personal property tax. And so they wanted to know why they were denied. And I noticed they had a note on their account that their taxes were not up to date and paid, and they had no idea. So they were able to contact the county, get those paid, and now they're eligible for phase 2. So if your taxes, business, real property, business personal property, and or your personal residence, you need to make sure those are up to date before you can apply. The reason that's important is because if you say you owe $3,000 on your taxes and you could potentially get up to $50,000 on a grant, it just makes sense to get those paid and get your application in for this next phase. Applications are open from noon on Monday, so they open actually on the 22nd. They'll be open through July 6th. They're noon to noon. That's also important to remember. I know we had a couple of applicants call us right after the first phase application window closed, and they wanted to know how they get their documentation in. Well, I said, don't be discouraged on that because there's going to be a phase 2. We're working on that now. However, make sure you're paying attention to where the deadlines are. So we're giving basically, obviously, 2 weeks and then 2 weekends in there as well. I know 4th of July weekend is probably not a weekend that anybody wants to be dealing with business, but if it's something you can do to save your business, then I think it's very important. So business receiving grant funding, you'll be notified by email whether or not you receive it. You'll get an email on that. And then again, I want to touch on, we are a governmental body, so subject to Texas Public Information Act. So information you submit to Denton County in the application is subject to the act and therefore subject to public release. That does not mean everything. So we're getting clarity on that from the attorneys, but just know that we will not be releasing your Social Security numbers. That's never an option I know the state wouldn't require that. I know PPP money, they're just now releasing some of the business names in that program. So the application process. So you're going to have a few different things on the application. All of these are not, most of these are documents that you have to read through it, and there's a checkbox next to it on the application. So good faith certification. You got to submit the requested information and documentation. You've got to certify the grant request is necessary due to the conditions of COVID. Agreement to be audited of the grant use, where the grant funds are going. That's going to be important because there's a report you're going to have to turn in February of 2021. But just know that you'll need to keep track of where all the funds are going when you receive a grant. And then you agree to a clawback provision and then an unsworn declaration of ownership of the business you're applying for. What types of businesses are eligible? So corporations, individuals, sole proprietorships, single-membered LLCs, your LLCs treated as a partnership, your C Corp and S Corp LLCs, and then your general partnerships are eligible for phase 2. How can you use the fund? So your eligible uses of the grant proceeds, your payroll costs for employees or owners draw, contract labor, your supplier payments, rent, lease, or interest on your mortgage payment. That's important, your interest, so not your principal there, or your rent, lease, or purchase payment for business property. So if you have a food truck or you need to add a vehicle, so you have a fleet service, so lawn company things like that, you can do that. I would also be very careful about that. There was an article that came out yesterday morning on the PPP program that had an applicant that purchased a Tesla with their PPP money. So I wouldn't recommend doing that unless you have really good backup documentation on while you're using that for your business. A few more things you can use for the grant proceeds. So new or expanded technology applications. So if your business model changed, you've had to buy a computer, set up new Wi-Fi, things like that, that's eligible. Cost of critical business operations, your PPE and sanitation supplies, and then your interest on other business debt obligations incurred before March 1st. I want to go real quick back to the PPE and sanitation supplies. So if you've been spending money since this went down and you've been buying masks and gloves for your employees, please include all those invoices and receipts. All of that is eligible to be reimbursed on. So not only your lost revenues, but also what you've been spending on PPE supplies. Your documents required. So this is important. You have to have documentation of business. There's a few different documents you can use to do that. You could also use a sales tax number for that. We do require driver's license or state issued ID. Your most recent filed business tax return. If you are a new business and you just started in, say, January or March, you obviously won't have a business tax return yet. So that is an option. It's not the required document on this phase. So just don't be discouraged about that. Obviously, if you were going to open your doors in March or April, you're not going to have that tax return. Your most recent payroll report, so your first quarter 941 for 2020. Again, if you were going to open in February, March, April, May, something like that, you don't have the payroll report. So just know that won't be included either. If you do have it, please include it though. Your bank and income statements from January 1st to from 2020 to May 31st of 2020. That's also important. Actually, I would include even through June, mid of June, right before the application opened. Again, for businesses that are new, you just need to be showing how money is going out right now. So if you were going to open in, let's say, March 1st, and you've been paying rent on a business you could never open your doors for, then you're eligible for those losses. So you need to be able to prove that to our auditors, and they need to be able to see that documentation. Some of the other required documents, you can turn in your Schedule C, 1819 for sole proprietorship. You'll have to do a Form W-9, and each business will be required as part of the application to attest they are not an ineligible business, which is not too difficult. We're pretty clear on the ineligible businesses that we'll touch on in a moment. And then you've got to, again, submit documentation for proof of fund uses by February 15th of 2021. So just remember, if you do receive a grant, keep all those receipts, keep all those invoices. So when we're audited by the U.S. Treasury and then pass that on to the businesses, we've got to show where all that money is spent. Ineligible businesses. Those are nonprofits, sexually adult-oriented businesses, lobbying organizations, anything to do with gambling, concerns engaged in illegal activities, and then a business that is otherwise prohibited by federal or Texas law. We always get this question about nonprofits. Our chambers are nonprofits. We understand a lot of these nonprofits are struggling right now. The Commissioners Court has worked very closely with United Way to help as many nonprofits as possible, and they're really focusing on people and families and rent relief and putting food on their tables. I know there's a lot of other nonprofits that have had to cancel their biggest fundraising events, whether it be a golf tournament or a gala or a banquet. So they are continuously talking about how they can help the nonprofits. But I know they do understand there are a lot of those that are hurting right now. So if you do see something that could be helped, or a nonprofit that could be helped that you know of, please email us that maybe they do some good in the community or through the county, and we can get them some information to be helped out through the United Way. Continuation of ineligible businesses, the business that is ineligible or precluded to receive federal or state of Texas funding, multi-level marketing concerns, and then your governmental taxing agencies departments, which is pretty straightforward. So the summary of changes from phase 1 to phase 2, just to go over. So I know a lot of you have seen what we did in phase 1. So applications open 2 weeks this time. So June 22nd through July 6th. The grants are from 10 to 50,000. So you can get up to 50,000 this phase instead of up to the 10,000. We did 50 employees the first phase and 100 employees the second phase. And then the revenue cap went from 7 to 15 million. And then, like I mentioned earlier, the non-essential partially open requirement is no longer required. That's been basically pushed aside out the door. And then, so if you're non-essential, partially open, or fully essential and can show a loss, you are eligible to receive a grant. And then you have to have started before May 1st of 2020, which really opens it up. We did have a few different businesses apply anyway that had started after that March 1st, 2019 date. So that's kind of a summary of everything here from phase 1 to phase 2. Here's the information on the website, dentoncounty.gov/open. This is our email address for the call center, as well as the actual phone number for the call center. So at this time, I'll pass it back over to Cindy and see if anyone has any questions.
Okay, thank you, Michael. So far, I've not seen anybody on the that has a question. So guys, if you have a question, put it in the chat or let me know and I'll call on you.
I have one question.
Okay, Russ Webb, go ahead.
Do you have to have your 2019 filed tax return? Because right now I have not filed my 2019 tax return. That's cool.
No, but Russ, that's a great question. No, you do not. Obviously, a lot of people have not filed since that's a July 15th deadline now. So if you don't have the 19, the 18 is perfect.
So they'll just require the 2018 tax return, individual and S Corp, when you turn in this paperwork?
Yeah.
Okay.
Whatever your business is filed under. So if it's a proprietorship, obviously under Schedule C, or if it's under a completely different C Corp, S Corp, then you would send that information in.
Okay, good question, Russ. Thank you. Anybody else?
Hey, Michael, it's Lori. Really quickly, I know you went through the items that the funding can be used for that are eligible. And I know you touched on the Tesla, but what are some of kind of like the top 5 that people may think, oh, I wonder that you can't use the money for?
You know, we tried to be pretty open. The only major questions we've gotten on that is on the payroll question is, you know, with the PPP requirement is obviously that they had to keep a certain head count. We're not requiring that, but that's really been, we've had that question multiple times in some of these presentations, but other than that, we haven't really had any questions on eligible uses.
Good.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, Cheryl, you had a question for Michael.
So I'm wondering if it is only based on income and loss of income in those 5 months. The reason I'm asking is my business works on year-long contracts. And so work I did last fall, I got paid for just recently. However, I've only accepted one teeny tiny contract since January, which is 80% less than what I normally would get. So is it, if you look at the bank statement, you still see money coming in, but it was money already owed me from work since September of last year. So is there any way to look at that?
If you can include, and they can look at losses from last year as well, or your income from last year. So if you look at, if you're able to do your tax returns, you're going to be able to look at some of that. What we did in phase 1 that could help you in phase 2 with your application is we looked at from March 1st, 19 on. So we only required 4 months, so March and April of 19 and then March and April of 20 to actually do those comparisons. But we originally looked at 14 months, so March 1st on. So if you could show what you actually made last year during the same period of time, that would be very beneficial to you. We've actually had a couple of questions from people that have businesses in the arts. So a few actually different movie, video companies that, you know, they work on projects. So they don't bring all their money in. They don't bring their money in every 2 weeks like a normal business. So if you, the more documentation you can show of what your income was and then what it has dropped down to, that the auditors can check out, because that's who's really looking at this, and they're going to have the final decision. But they have to be able to see those comparisons. So when you submit that documentation, just make sure you're submitting enough. And if you have any questions on that, again, shoot an email over to our call center just to verify that's correct before you hit submit.
All right, thank you, Michael.
Great, Cheryl, thank you. Anybody else have a question for Michael?
I have a question.
Okay, Tiffany.
Can you hear me? Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I looked at my application and it says that it's under review from phase 1. And so I don't know, what does that mean? Does it mean it's still actually under review? Or how
Good
would I
question.
know like what's going on with that?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So this is something you already have an account set up, correct? So you applied for phase 1?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if I should apply for phase 2 as well.
Okay. Well, if it's saying it's under review, they've already been reviewed. So you'll need to go back into your account, and there should be another option below the phase 1 under review, and where you can actually do another application under phase 2. So it's not actually under review. I don't know why they still say that. We had this actual question the other day before we even opened the application, because we were looking at that issue. So you'll have to go back in, and actually, Tiffany, if you can do me a favor and put your email address in the chat, and I will shoot you an email on exactly how to go about applying for phase 2 with that specific problem.
Okay, because it has a link where it says add another. So is that what I should click on?
That's it. That's it right there. Absolutely. That's it.
And I had another question. Is it okay if I ask that?
Sure. Go for it.
Okay. I realized that my LLC, I didn't do what I needed to do to keep that in effect, but I still have my DBA. So would that affect my approval?
No, your DBA should be fine. Are you talking about proof of the business when it was started?
Yes.
Yeah, that shouldn't be an issue. Your DBA, when you incorporated, when your sales tax number was issued, things like that can be used to verify your business by the auditors.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello, I have a question.
Okay.
I asked it in the chat, but I wasn't sure if you got it or not. Can you apply if you receive the EIDL?
Absolutely. So just because you applied for PPP money or EIDL, and even if you received it, we're not penalizing you for trying to save your business. So you can absolutely apply and be awarded if you received both.
Okay.
Perfect. if you put a question in the chat, I'm not seeing it, so go ahead and just unmute yourself and ask the question.
I have a question.
Okay.
We recently moved from Illinois, like end of last year towards Christmas. And my license is still Illinois because I never got a chance to change it. But the business is all based in Flower Mound. I have all the paperwork. Will that license go against me?
You would have to show paperwork that it's based in Denton County. That's the main thing you would
all
need
of
to show.
it. Yeah, we have all of that. Absolutely.
Then that shouldn't be an issue then.
Great. Another quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
We have only one employee who's on W-2. The rest of our 6 employees are on 1099s. But our bank statement very clearly shows payments going out on a recurring basis twice a month to particular individuals who are my 1099 employees. Are all 7 employees eligible?
So look at it this way. So contract labor is not eligible. It would just be your employees, but we're really just looking at losses. So if you can show a loss in revenue during this period, that's the main concern during this phase, because CARES Act money, actually, whatever grant you're receiving, and it cannot extend past your actual losses. So if you lost $10,000, you couldn't get 11. You could only get up to 10. So just to be able to, you need to look at those, whatever documentation you're sending in, and you need to send in something that shows comparisons of what you're actually losing during the period of time.
Okay. One more last one. Is business debt eligible? We're still paying for the business. It's a new business, and that's the reason we didn't qualify in the first round. We started November 2019, and every month we have a payment to make to release the business. Like it's in our name, but we still owe money. And I have the documentation for that also. Would that be included as a cost on a monthly basis?
You can do interest on business debt, but not actual principal.
Principal.
So yeah, we could do the interest. We did talk to the attorneys about that. That was something we discussed. And we don't obviously want we don't want to penalize you for going into business or expanding your business. But right now, based on CARES Act, the clarity with those questions, it's really just your interest on your mortgage, your interest on your business debt.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I have a question. So you said that you guys are comparing, I just need clarification. Are y'all comparing January and February to March, April, and May, or are y'all comparing last year to this year?
They're going to look at January, February, but they're also going to look at what your tax returns are showing and more bank statements that you send in. So they're really going to look at January, February before everything shut down, so they can really get a comparison of how your business was doing. But then we get into the discussion of the new businesses. Obviously, if you started March 15th, you're not going to have that comparison. So with that example, they're actually going to look at really fixed costs of what money's going out of your bank account. So probably your rent, if you have a retail space, your utilities, things of that nature that they can actually look at. But yes, January and February will be compared to March, April, May.
Okay. Okay. And then for owner's draw, if you did owner's draw, then are you just keeping tabs or keeping keeping, I guess, receipts or stubs from owner's draw, or what you do after you draw?
No, not after you draw. That would just the draw itself. Basically, yeah, that's a great question. We've actually not even had that question in phase 1 or phase 2. But yeah, if you're a sole proprietor and you're your only employee, you're paying yourself, obviously. You've got to pay your bills. So you don't have to have documentation of where you're spending your paycheck. No, okay. You don't have to do that. You have to keep your grocery store receipts and things like that.
Right. Do you want my my bills? Okay. Right. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. And so I also have another question if no one does. So you mentioned the stats at the beginning, about 2,000 started, 1,400 submitted, and then the numbers trickle down from there. Do you expect to be, do you think the process was more strenuous in phase one, or why was it due to funding because you guys did go over? So what is expected to happen differently in phase two that could possibly have hindered people in phase three? Oh, I'm sorry, in phase two.
Well, sure. So phase one, the 450 that were awarded were actually all of the eligible businesses that came through with the correct documentation. So there were not any businesses in phase one that were taken out if they had the correct documentation and correct, forms put in. So we think it'll be easier in phase two. We have some clarity on some things, and then we actually obviously open it up for more businesses to apply. The non-essential, partially open, essential issue was an issue in phase one with people not really understanding and knowing how to go about that. So we really wanted to open that up as well. We don't know, like I said, 700 or 800, I think it was just over 800 applications that had been started. We don't know why those weren't finished. So we don't know if it's lack of documentation or they forgot about when the application closed. So things like that we're not 100% sure of. I will tell you this, we have been, I've received a lot of emails and phone calls personally, and then obviously the call center has as well. So if we're able to help someone figure out why they got denied in phase one and help them apply for phase two, that example I gave when the young lady didn't even know she had 4 years of back business personal property tax that she had not paid, and that's why she was ineligible. She was able to take care of that. Now she's eligible for up to $50,000 in phase two.
Okay. So it sounds like basically just have the correct paperwork accessible.
You got it. That is the major key. Absolutely. And like I mentioned earlier as well, there were people that made mistakes and grabbed, when you're attaching something, it happens to people. You grab the wrong thing. I always double check if I'm about to submit something or email something, I will reopen that document just to make sure it's the correct one. But we did have an example of someone sending in their credit card statement instead of their bank statement.
And so you guys didn't contact the person and say, hey, you sent in the wrong document. You just ineligible.
So this is how the auditors did phase one. If they found something incorrect, they just set it aside and moved on to the next one because of the 1,300 applications they received. I believe we'll receive more applications in this phase, but obviously we're yet to see the full numbers on that.
Right. And then my last question is, do the auditors determine the amount you've lost, or do you calculate your loss, or both?
You can calculate it in your documentation, but they're going to look at the actual documents to verify that. So just like your address that you put on the application, they verify that you're actually in Denton County. So all those things they look at. So, but they want to actually see those bank statements. They don't want to see a profit loss statement that you did yourself because you could just plug in numbers. They want to actually see the statement so they can make comparisons.
Right. So in the application, because I haven't seen the application, are they going to ask us for a number, or is there just asking for the documents and they're just going to calculate the number themselves?
There is a number yes, there'll be a number that you calculate.
Oh, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
And we did that in phase one as well.
Okay. Anybody else have a question for Michael? No?
I have a.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
So when I tried to go on to fill out the application, my stage status is listed as red. How do I reach out to the administrator of the program?
So is this phase two application?
Yes. So when I go to fill out the application, since I already have an account, it comes up to my profile and it says in the Get Started on the homepage, if your status bar is red, there's an error. Please reach out to the administrator of this program.
Okay, you can email have you emailed the call center to get
No, I
clarification
have
on
not.
that?
No.
Okay, send an email, and I don't know if Cindy's can share the actual email and phone number if they've done that, but it's opengrants@dentoncounty.gov, and you can find that in the phone number if you go to dentoncounty.gov/open. And so go ahead and send an email to them to get clarification on that. I have, like I said, the auditors are the ones who handle the actual applications. We're able to see phase one information after everything is decided on, but we're hands off. Commissioners Court was very clear about that because the auditor does not report to Commissioners Court. So go ahead and send an email to them, and they should be able to get back to you on what you're needing there.
And what was that email address again?
It is opengrants@dentoncounty.gov.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Can we put that back up on the screen, or can Cindy send us, just so we've got it again, the email and the phone number if we've got any questions? It was up there earlier.
Sure.
I can attach the document. So Cindy has the whole PDF document that she shared with us. So if anyone wants it, if you put your email, if I don't have it already, put your email in the chat and we can email that document to you because it's got everything in it, including the contact info.
Right.
I'm going to try to put it on the chat.
Yeah.
I can send it to
And
you.
again, all of that information is just go to the Denton County website, so dentoncounty.gov/open, OPEN. All that information is there as well.
Got it. And I've put it in the chat so you can get it from there. Okay, anybody else have anything for Michael while he's on?
I have a question. My name is Ali. Can I ask?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
So Michael, I did submit my application just yesterday, day before yesterday, right? I didn't realize that I had to submit profit and loss as well. I thought I can just submit the bank statement. Is there any way I can mail the additional documents out?
You do not need to send the profit loss. You just need to do the bank statements. What I was saying to the young lady that asked that was they will not look at a profit and loss statement because that's just done by someone, looking at their business. They want to actually look at the bank statements, money coming in, money going out. So you do not have to include the profit and loss. So you should be good with just your bank statements if you submitted.
Right. And the follow-up question is so I have got a lot of gloves. So I have a restaurant, right? So I've got a lot of gloves, masks, and all just to cover ourselves up, right? And we were open, we were one of the essential businesses. So, but I was just able to submit one invoice. Should I be submitting every invoice that I have just so that they can calculate the losses in there?
Is this for your PPE?
Yes.
Yeah, you need to submit everything you have that you've spent money on with PPE. Submit all of that if possible.
So I've already submitted my application. So how do I do that?
I'm gonna have to find out on that if you've already submitted. What is let me get your email address if you mind, sir. If you don't mind.
Sure. Can I type it and send it to you?
Sure.
Chat?
Absolutely.
Right.
That would be best.
You.
Okay. Anybody else? We've got a few more minutes.
Can you tell me if payments have been sent out from phase one?
Many of them have, yes. I know they already sent the first round of checks out, but they're waiting on documentation from those grant recipients. Or I'm sorry, the documents. They have to sign a few agreements as to being audited and clawbacks, things like that the attorneys put together for them. So as long as they got that documentation back, a lot of those checks have already gone out.
So I received approval, but no other instructions. So is there something else that I should be doing?
They should have sent you an email with an address, a web address to go to fill out those documents. You never received that email?
No.
Okay. Can you also put your email address in the chat, please, and I'll get back to you on that. I can find out
Okay.
for you.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Anybody else?
Thank you.
You got something else, Russ?
No, that's it.
Okay.
I'll call you if I need anything else.
All right.
Perfect.
Last opportunities. Anybody else have a question for Michael? Okay, so there, and I'll put it in the chat real quick. There's another meeting just like this one, same information, but if you missed it, you know, if you didn't hear everything, or if you know somebody else that wants to have a meeting like this, you can join the Metrocrest Chamber of Commerce is doing a meeting just like this one on Monday morning at 9 o'clock. So with Michael. And so I will put the ID and the password in the chat at 9 o'clock Monday morning, June 29th. Okay, so if you want to join another meeting about it, you certainly can.
And I wrote the address here. I changed my name, so if you guys didn't write down that address that Cindy gave us in the chat
Perfect.
here.
Perfect.
Michael,
Yeah.
did you go to tech?
Did I go to tech?
Yes.
Absolutely not.
Okay. You know what? That was a question in the chat, so I had to ask it. Oh my God.
Who asked that question, Russ Webb?
Yeah.
Hey, well, I want to thank y'all real quick for having me on. Please, if you're a business and you have friends that have their own businesses, please share the word about this. We have done a great job, I think, of partnering with our chambers and our EDCs and getting the word out. But we want to make sure that from the middle of the county to the corners of the county, that everybody's heard about this and has enough time to apply for their business. And we don't want anyone to come back, especially the Commissioners Court members, do not want anyone to come back and say, hey, I never knew anything about this. So please share the word. I know, spread the word. The chambers have done a great job, but please, if you own a business, don't assume that someone has already heard about it. Please go ahead and tell them again and again and remind them to get their application in.
Yes, and about the deadline. June 6th at noon is the deadline.
Yes, yes.
Okay, all right, Michael. We can't thank you enough.
Thank y'all so much.
You're the hero of the county.
Yeah. Y'all have a great day.
All
Appreciate
right.
it.
Thanks again. Thank you, Kelly Murray.